Hello, everyone. Hi. Welcome to another live stream. And I am joined this evening with the great Roger Yates. And we've been a while.
Hello.
Well, you're a long-term animal activist, and I think it's great to have you on the stream. And I think there's been a lot of people looking forward to me and you having a chat. And there's been a lot of people who've said to me, since I've been having guests on my channel, have been saying, when are you going to get Roger Yates on, Michelle? So I think for that reason, I think you can accept the great accolade just for the next hour or so.
Do you know, I think about 9 months ago, I emailed you, I think, inviting you to be on my podcast, and I never got a reply. But
I did reply, but it was probably just a long time later. People in who try to contact me on social media realize that I don't check my messages very often. So Facebook and Instagram messages go unread for a long time, quite regularly. I do check Twitter more often, but yeah, that's my bad. I'm a very bad YouTuber because I'm just not very good with
Twitter is weird though. I can never get used to Twitter. And the same
because it's funny.
Yeah, but like having conversations also on Instagram is very difficult, I think. Yeah.
I don't like Instagram. It's just all pictures, and then people send me random messages, and I don't know who they are, and they just say something like "hi," or it'll just be a link, and I'll be thinking, well, I can't be bothered. I can't be bothered with it. But anyway, here we are. So we've got quite a few people in the chat already. So let's just say a few hellos, and then we'll get straight into it. So Twisted Hippie's been here 111 minutes. So he says. And hello, Tom and AJ UK, Fear of a Vegan Planet, Perpetually Annoyed. Hello, everyone. Sylvia, Nella, Jeremy. Hello, Jeremy. Jenna Lee, Deb. My chat's just jumped. The vegan vlogger, Laura, Cat the Vegan Artist, Charlotte, JJ, Deb. Yeah, good. And we've still got more coming in. So fantastic. So, Roger, without further ado, we've got a lot to get through. We've had a quick chat before we went live. So we've got some ideas of what we want to talk about, but there are also some things that we want to throw out to the chat to see what you guys think of certain things. So, Roger, for those people who don't know you, do you want to kind of introduce yourself and tell us about your animal rights activism? That's
Okay. Well, I tried to get involved with the movement in 1977. It was a bit of a false start in the sense that that's when I first joined the hunt saboteurs. And the reason I did that was I saw a music paper article, and the hunt sabs were asking for action rather than money. So this relates to my sister, who also went vegan very early on. I think she went vegan about 1982. She claims it was a year before me. I went vegan in 1979, but she claims it was 78, but that's not true. So we've got a sibling rivalry there. But she used to be very involved with like the World Wildlife Fund and everything. And I had this vision of the envelope, on the thing, the tiger appeal, the elephant appeal. And then there was also a financial scandal involving the RSPCA, where something like £60,000, which was a lot of money in the early 70s, was spent on office carpets for the CEO or something. And so I used to think to my sister, I used to say to my sister, are you sure that money is getting there? And so when I kind of came across the SABs, I thought, well, these guys are not asking for money, they're asking for action. So that kind of really appealed to me. And so I went straight into the activist community, really. And so by the time we got around to 1979, I had moved down to Essex. I was a projectionist at the time. And I got involved with the Romford Hunt Sabs. And I went vegan very quickly. In fact, I didn't go through a vegetarian phase at all. And I was always grateful for that. I know a few people get a bit stuck in the vegetarian thing. And I know you've got an interesting history about that. Because I've been vegan for a long time, but at least you've gone vegan twice, Michelle.
Yeah, I have indeed. I have indeed. Yeah.
So there's that, and so I got involved with the activist thing very quickly. I ended up in the Orkneys, the Save the Seals, kind of Sea Shepherd thing, and so I was very much grassroots, very much action, and then people that know the name Ronnie Lee, he co-founded the Animal Liberation Front, and he was so busy at the time dealing with the media that he couldn't really cope, and so he needed somebody else, and so I became the Northern press officer for the Animal Liberation Front. But I was only there for about 8 months before we all got arrested, and then it was interesting that actually, because I think we were causing so much trouble and causing so much damage that the state decided that they needed to close us down, and it was the press office that they targeted rather than the activists. So they just wanted to kind of cut the head off, if you like. And so Ronnie got 10 years, I got 4 years. And I think I went to about 4 different prisons altogether. And when I got out of that, I went into academia. And luckily, I was able to carry on being a kind of activist. I became like, so-called like an activist scholar activist. And we thought that we could like do this twin thing. We could kind of, if you like, translate the movement to academia, and we could translate some academic ideas into the movement. And one thing which is very relevant to you is that I'm always a bit disappointed that people don't really seem to resonate with sociological ideas, whereas they do with psychological ideas. And exactly why that is, maybe you've got some ideas, but it's an interesting one. So that's kind of me, I suppose.
I don't know. I think psychology is popular because everybody thinks they understand it. Everybody can have a go at being an armchair psychologist, and they've probably seen, popular psychology documentaries or dramatization. Is that a word? Dramas that involve psychologists or psychological themes. So everybody thinks that they know how to do psychology. So I think that is something that we've got a drum out of students. Students come in into university wanting to do a psychology degree, and they think psychology is all about catching criminals, and they're going to kind of be some kind of media star. And I don't think sociology has got the same kind of sexiness in the media. So maybe people just don't really understand what sociology is, whereas they think they understand what psychology is. I don't know. It's interesting.
I'll tell you what came up in the in one of the private chats for the Animal Rights Show, which I'm involved with a really good team of people. We were talking about what's the precise definition of social psychology, and because I've always argued in the past that there's kind of no such thing as psychology and no such thing as sociology. It's all social psychology in the sense that people are not isolated individuals. At the same time, the structures of society are made up by the individuals within it. So what's social psychology to you then, Michelle?
Social psychology is the study of the individual within their social world. So in a nutshell, how the individual interacts with their environment, with the people around them, how they interact on their own versus in a group, and then everything that comes from that. So a lot of it's about group dynamics.
There's a lot of leakage, isn't there? A lot of leakage between the three disciplines, I suppose.
Yeah, there is. And I teach criminological and forensic psychology. So although I'm teaching criminological psychology, I'm teaching a lot of criminology theory. And the criminology theory is kind of seeped from sociology. So we're kind of going backwards and forwards with ideas. So yeah, there definitely is some kind of overlap. There's some elements of psychology that have nothing to do with sociology, and then others that align kind of closely with it. But that's your academic discipline, isn't it? Sociology. And
yeah, I did some criminology, funny enough, in undergrad. And in fact, my PhD supervisor was a criminologist.
Right.
So I've done a couple of chapters in sociology books and stuff, including green criminology, which is an interesting one, kind of crimes against the environment, you know, that kind of idea.
Yeah.
And then the idea of street crime versus sweet crime, in other words, corporate crime. The radical and critical criminology. I was really interested in that kind of stuff. Right. So a lot of that leached into my PhD. A funny story, actually. When I first arrived at university, which was just as I got out of prison, in fact, they had to have a meeting. I was 2 weeks late to start in the term because they had to have a meeting to find out if it was too dangerous for me to go. And then they decided to let me in. And so I arrived there, and this guy, Roy King, he used to, he's one of the big cheeses of the big vegan cheeses of the criminology department, and he used to shock his first year students by going, "Some of my best friends are lifers," and I thought, so what is new? You know, it wasn't much of a shock for me. So there you go.
What was it like, Roger, being in prison as a vegan? Did they feed you okay?
Yeah, it was hit and miss sometimes, depending where you were.
I've just frozen. I don't know whether... Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, but you have frozen, yeah.
Yeah, that's weird.
Should I carry on?
Yeah, just carry on. There we go. We're back.
Oh, yeah, back now. Yeah, it's hit and miss. So some areas are really good. There's one patch for about 2 weeks, I think, at this semi-open I was at called Wymot, and they had some student chefs come in, and the meals were brilliant for that 2 weeks. Often they would like mess it up, and I would often have to go into the kitchens with a screw, you know, just to find out what's happened to the vegan meal, which obviously is always called special diet in those days. You also had to be a member of the Vegan Society, and so the vegans, you had to actually show them the card, and a lot of people were getting nicked in those days, and so we said to the Vegan Society, look, you know, you just dish out the cards and we'll pay you afterwards, and they refused. So we just forged the cards because we just thought, well, you know, we can't have people in prison not being able to show the card, because otherwise they wouldn't get a plant-based diet, you know. But the weird thing is, a lot of prisoners go on the vegetarian diet because it's usually seen as better than the flesh-based diet. And the reason for that is, when I used to get taken to the kitchens, there was all these kind of big trays and piles of flesh on one side and another set on the other side, and the good quality stuff was all held for the screws, and they would often just go out as well with like, you know, sacks full of it, as it were. And so there was a bit of a con thing going on. Yeah, and so the cons actually got the worst of the flesh, and so that's why they often went on the veggie diet, because that was seen as better. So it's a really kind of weird thing. But they used to call me Mr. Vegan in prison, and so I found that if you had somebody to vouch for you, because obviously they understood straight away that I wasn't really a con, you know, so they kind of regarded me as a political prisoner, which I kind of was, but obviously the institution couldn't do that, but the other cons did. And so when the new cons used to come down every Friday, and it was really funny, you know, like you know, we always think about, you know, the idea of a pecking order with chickens, right? Exactly the same thing happened every week at Wymot, because you get these guys walking onto the wing like this, you know, kind of, and they all did this kind of, you know, where am I going to fit in with the pecking order? And you got the kind of people who are kind of running the wing, as it were, and they then kind of had a bit of a, not a fight or anything, but it was there's a bit of tension for the first couple of days until everything settled down into the pecking order. And I remember being in one, I used to get called into one guy's cell, and because he used to fill in the Sun crossword, but he used to get stuck. And so he would go, 4 letters, meaning boat. And I go, ship. And he goes, oh, yeah, that's it. And so he thought I was some kind of genius because I was able to finish the Sun crossword. And so one day I was in his cell and I was sat on his bed and he was on his chair behind a table. And this new guy came in. And of course, all the new guys, they used to come in from a thing called induction. They were always desperate for a fag. And because they used to come to me all the time, have you got a fag? And I say, sorry, mate, I don't smoke. And then they come back 10 minutes later and ask me again. And I say, I still don't smoke. But they came into this guy's cell and he had a pile of tobacco on the table, And the guy goes, can you just give me some snout, mate? And the guy looked at him and he said, sorry, mate, I haven't got any. And the guy looked down at this pile of tobacco on the table. And then he looked back up and he goes, just enough for one, mate, just a bit of snout. And he goes, sorry, mate, I've told you I haven't got any. So he looked down again at this pile of tobacco on the table. And I thought it was like watching something out of a Western movie. And I thought, oh, no, it's all going to kick off, right? And I'm going to be like in the middle of it all. And so it was a question of who's going to back down. It was one of these kind of things, alpha male crap, And eventually the new guy just turned and went. And so, the existing guy had kind of proven his dominance. And so it was a real literal human pecking order sorted out every week. It's amazing.
That's really interesting. So at least they were able to feed you, which is always a concern. I mean, I
think it's pretty good now. I mean, I don't think you need to be a member of the vegan society anymore. And I think that it's like everywhere. The idea of plant-based meals are pretty much universal now, just like in restaurants and stuff. I mean, when I went vegan, it was a bit more difficult. I mean, it wasn't impossible, obviously, but we talk about the 1970s, so.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why I asked you about what you were offered in prison back then is because I've had UK Vegan Family on my channel a couple of weeks ago, and they've got a young son, and he's 3 at the moment, but they're concerned when he goes to school that there's lots of kind of horror stories about vegan children being bullied, and schools not really being equipped to offer plant-based food to vegan children. And they're starting an initiative to really just survey schools throughout the UK to see what they offer and what they know about veganism. So I think although, veganism has, and we'll talk about this shortly, it's I suppose come on leaps and bounds in terms of the public's knowledge about what veganism is, and food companies wanting to kind of stick a vegan label onto food now because it's trendy, and it will sell some, McDonald's plant-based burgers coming, and KFC have done the plant-based chicken burger and so on, and it's trendy, and schools haven't quite caught up. I think they've got some work to do. But Roger, I wanted to get your opinion on the vegan community. So the vegan community that we know and love on YouTube, but also more widely. I mean, how have things changed, and what are your views on the vegans around us today?
Well, I'm pretty new to the vegan community on YouTube. In fact, I think I discovered your channel first, and then people like Grumpy Vegan Grandad and all I'm Easy Vegan. All those were kind of new to me, even 7 weeks ago. So I do realize, vegan gays as well. Obviously, I knew Hench before from various veg fests and stuff, So I kind of knew a couple of people, and what interested me with your one, of course, was your academic slant to it. And so it's interesting. I think there's an interesting kind of community. And, I know that there's just a few people doing like just hangouts now. And I think that's really good because that provides a social place, especially during lockdown, for vegans to meet, and I think it's really good. Vegan Gays seem to do like a 4-hour one, maybe a 5-hour one. Yeah,
yeah, 5 hours yesterday. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And so that actually is very good. I used to, when I was an activist in the 80s, I used to be involved with the NAL, the Northern Animal Liberation League, and that was based in Manchester. And they did a lot of social events, and I was very critical of them at the time. And now I realized how important those social events are for group cohesion and all the rest of it. And I was actually wrong, and they were right. Because I always used to think, well, you could be out doing stuff rather than going to, a veggie cafe or whatever for a meeting, that kind of stuff. And I also used to have that same attitude about things like partying or going to films and stuff. People would invite me to the cinema, and I'd say, well, look, I'll come to the cinema when there's no more rape and there's no more animal use, there's no more rights violations, there's no more slavery and all the rest of it. And I said, then we can really enjoy the film, and then we can really enjoy the party, because that used to happen to me all the time. I used to be in a social setting, and something would happen, and it would remind me that we've got a shitty world to sort out, kind of thing. And quite more often than not, it would be some guy does something crap towards some woman, in a pub or a party or something, and it would kind of, oh, here we go again, kind of thing, And so I would kind of feel let down, and I would think, well, there's no point in going until we get the fundamentals sorted out. But again, I realize that social movements, they've got to be social. They do move, and they've also got to be social. So I think the vegan community that I've kind of discovering really on YouTube that you're involved in seems to be really kind of quite good and supportive to each other. There's other things that I've never engaged with, like the banana girl and all this kind of stuff. That's all alien to me. All this, is it some rider guy or what is it?
Syrian rider.
Yeah. Never seen any of that stuff. And I never watch any of the fitness stuff. Not interested in that. Not really that involved with the kind of bodybuilding kind of stuff either. I mean, people like John Venus, bit of a mystery to me. Tim Sheaf, I knew from Veg Fest.
Sorry, he's blind and he hears a noise outside and he goes mad. Jack, it's fine. Everything's fine. Oh, he's guarding the door. Sorry about that.
I thought that was my cat. So I'm kind of, I don't know that much. I mean, I know there's some interesting. I think there's some interesting thing because I'm really interested in the history of the movement, and we might want to talk about that. But and so I am interested in the kind of status of some prominent YouTube kind of people or events in the history of the movement, because there just seemed to be at least one generation gap in the movement where there seems to be a lot of people, for example, who kind of seem to think that the animal movement began with Gary Yourofsky, and the movement now for some people seems to be DXE, SAVE, and AV. Right, and obviously that is just a modern phenomena, and what's interesting to me is this idea of the vegan entrepreneurs, the Joeys and all that. Well, that's new to me because we never thought about becoming famous. In fact, we used to hide our identity in those days, and we also never thought about making any money from it. And but the idea of full-time activists, people think that's new. Well, it's not new. If you go back to the 1980s, there was more full-time activists then than now. And I mean, I could think of loads of them. Dave Callender, Fiona Callender, all kind of people. All over the country, full-time activists. And the way that people were full-time activists in those days was by being long-term unemployed, deliberately. And so the idea then, because it was a bit more anarchic then, the idea then was that the government was funding the activism, and also it meant that you weren't paying the taxes. Because if you pay your taxes, you're paying into animal use, vivisection, all the rest of it. Which is why I've said to the people, or I've suggested that the people who are making a lot of money should think very carefully about the tax bracket that they're in. You know, but that's a kind of just a technical issue. But I think it's down to them to kind of, I think they need to be transparent about their income personally. But I know that's a controversial thing to say.
It is, and it's something that obviously, as I've talked about on this channel recently in live streams, the fact that Anonymous for the Voiceless have got this kind of rich donor, and I don't know how much you're aware of the Joey Carbstrong thing. Joey was
I did see some of that.
And that has taken, I think, you know, there's some really bad feeling on both sides, and it's a shame. But my point is, you know, don't blame Joey because he's got the same donor, I believe. So don't blame Joey for it. He was in a really difficult position. But at the same time, you know, Anonymous for the Voiceless do some good work. And I wish that these rich donors, rather than giving them to individuals, rather than funding individuals to do certain, you know, activists, a grassroots activist would do free of charge. Don't fund that. Fund in my view, what we really need is increased politicization and understanding that the real issues are way beyond just what people choose to eat. You know, things like farming subsidies. You know, until we deal with farming subsidies, we are never going to see a demand supply, right? That if demand for meat, dairy, eggs goes down, the farming subsidies, and many countries throughout the world are, you know, their farmers are subsidized. So whilst their farmers are subsidized, it doesn't matter whether demand goes down because they get paid anyway. So, you know, it's something that I could jump up and down on a soapbox all day and all night, and very few people actually listen. And I'm really pleased now that when I started my YouTube channel a couple of years ago, just over 2 years ago now, and in the first few months, I'd started talking about farming subsidies, and I wasn't getting any viewers whatsoever. And I'm really pleased now, 2 years down the line, that more and more people are talking about farming subsidies and realizing that there is this massive issue that we can encourage 50% of the population to go vegan, but until we end farming subsidies, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. So that's my personal view. That big money coming into the vegan movement needs to be spent very, very wisely.
Well, also you've got to wonder whether the big money is in the right place, because you can spread it a lot thinner in the grassroots movement. What we really need to do is empower the grassroots, I feel. And, you know, people like Ronnie Lee and, you know, people involved with the Animal Rights Show and everything, we're kind of grassroots people, and we want to kind of develop the grassroots. And so I'm not quite sure that at the moment we're in the right kind of position. I mean, going back to when I was more active, I mean, I'm still doing the VIP. That thing in the background is our double gazebo thing. It's, you know, 6 meters by 3 meters of space, you know. And at the time, that was Temple Bar Square, which is right bang in the centre of Dublin. So we you know, it was a big prestigious place to be. So still doing all that, but I got to confess that I don't understand AV, and I don't understand Save in the sense of the money. Now, I understand that you get a few people together with laptops and a cube and all that. And I understand that you get a few people together outside a slaughterhouse and you stop the trucks and you take photographs and you put it on social media. I don't understand why that takes millions of dollars at all. And if it is millions of dollars, it should go out to the grassroots. And you get more and more claims that it's not doing that. It's staying at the top of the kind of hierarchy. And that is not revolutionary. So it seemed to be counter-revolutionary to me. And I don't understand. I mean, even more so than AV save? I mean, why do you need millions of pounds to encourage people to get outside a slaughterhouse and take photographs? See, I don't understand it. So it's really interesting. And whenever I contact people who are involved in, say, AV organizing, well, they say, well, we actually bought everything ourselves, and we do everything ourselves. But then you get all these kind of rules and regulations and stuff, which again is not very counter-revolutionary from my point of view. I'd be more kind of anarchic, kind of like, well, this is what some people do, this is what other people do. Do what you want, stand in a bleeding circle if you want. You don't have to be, you don't have to follow these weird rules, and that seems to me to be a bit odd. But at the same time, I was told by somebody in Dublin a couple of years ago now, when AV started there, that there's a lot of people who like wearing the uniform and they like being told what to do. Now, I can understand the psychology of that. But, that's not very revolutionary in the sense that what we need to do is empower these people to become activists in their own right, rather than followers. So we don't need this creation of leaders and followers, or prime movers and followers, like we'd say in sociology. We need everybody to become a prime mover themselves and to be kind of activists, activated. And of course, they can do then whatever they want, pressure campaigns, cubes. And also, of course, they could do that. You could go to a save one thing, and then you go to a AV cube. I mean, you're just going to have to get people organized in your area. I mean, I've been told that I'm quite lucky in Dublin because there's loads of groups doing loads of things. And so, if you want to, you could probably go to something every day of the week. And look, I think London's the same. Yeah. But this is what we need to create everywhere. And so if there is money in the movement, and clearly there is, it needs to be everywhere and not in these power centers. So we don't want it in individuals. We don't want it in individual groups and organizations, whether they're national groups like your Animal Aids and your Vivas and all that. All those could just go, because this is the age of the internet. And so we could do it ourselves. In fact, most of the good material that is being produced in the movement is nothing to do with these big structures. It's to do with people getting out there with the smartphones and putting together. It's not hard to put together a video nowadays.
No,
it used to be really hard just to do leaflets in my day. You used to have to you remember Letraset and all that kind of stuff, right? It used to be all that. Whereas now you can just wham, bam, there it is.
Yeah.
And so it's so easy, and we've now got a global instant communication system called the internet. There's no need for these structures, these power structures. And so we've got like a power elite in the movement. And it seems weird to me that we've replicated that system over and over again, and we still have it now. With a lot of powerful people who get a lot of money, or they get paid, kind of careerists of the movement, and the grassroots, as usual, gets neglected. And yet the grassroots is always the backbone of the movement. So I think we need to figure out a way of changing that.
I completely agree with you that the big money is being soaked up into some kind of cipher or funnel, and then it doesn't get spread. Like you say, we need to be much more equitable. If there is big money in the movement, then where is this big money? And a little bit for more people, I think, would be very, very helpful. But it winds me up because if you're not a part of AV or Save, then you're not a real vegan activist. That's what I've heard that so many times, that you either have got to be invested in AV and do their events, or Save, or both. And I've been and stood outside slaughterhouses on my own, just to bear witness to the animals, right? Why does that require, like you say, why does that require millions of pounds? It cost me the money of a bus ticket. That was it, right? So I could have got a few people together with some banners and gone and done a Save event, exactly the same as what Save is doing, at the local slaughterhouse, a few miles from here. It's not quite local, but yeah, why do we need lots of money in that movement? And AV, I don't know whether you saw it, the David Rams live stream a couple of weeks ago with Paul and Asal from AV. And
I saw bits of it.
Yeah, I watched it, and it was interesting, and it kind of covered some questions that I had, but I was left with more questions than answers, really. In that, well, if they're employing a social media team and they're employing 20 odd people, well, how much are these people getting paid, and why so many of them when we can do it anyway? So I think we're definitely on the same page there. So what I'd like to see is a much more diverse kind of grassroots, really being inventive and more creative in what they do. And I think that everybody should play to their strengths. Not everybody can be Joey Carbstrong, and why would we want everybody to be Joey Carbstrong? That everybody can play to their strengths. And if you're good at social media, if you're good at talking to people, do it your way. And if there are other people who want to join you in a particular endeavor, then go and do that. It takes very little organization really these days. Because of social media.
It's a conundrum, isn't it? I mean, like, you go back to this idea, oh well, you're not a real activist and everything, but the hunt saboteurs could say that if you're not out running around in the field, you're not a real activist. The ALF could have said that. If you haven't got a balaclava on and you're smashing into things, you're not a real activist. So where do you want to go there? Sea Shepherd could say it. So this kind of playing to your strengths is crucial, But more than that, what we really need to do is enable people to realize that not only can they play to their strengths, but they can actually fulfill their aspirations. Because I've lost count, Michelle, honestly, the number of meetings I've been in where people have said, it'd be great to do this, and wouldn't it be wonderful to do that? And you then start kind of, snowballing, and all the ideas come flowing through and everything, like a focus group. And then they go, oh yeah, but we can't afford it, right? And that's because, I mean, somebody said in the comments, why would you get rid of Animal Aid and Viva? It's because in the age of the internet, you don't need these structures which draw money in. And like, for example, I'm based in Dublin, in Ireland, Republic of Ireland, and Viva and Animal Aid are bound to have some Irish members, and all that means to me is that their subs are flying over us, and landing in Kent and London or wherever they're based nowadays. And you're thinking, well, that could have done with staying around here, because, I mean, like, Dublin is really active, but other areas of the Republic are not. But we could activate them if we had a bit more of that funding. It doesn't need for there to be power centres, be it PETA and Animal Aid, Viva, all the national groups you can think of, Mercy for Animals, all these kind of groups in the age of the internet, because there's nothing that they can do that we can't do just as good. There's just nothing. I don't know anything. The only exception I would say was probably the Vegan Society with the kite mark and that kind of thing. So I always make a bit of an exception with the Vegan Society, but everything else, I don't really understand why particularly you need them. And if there's money in the movement, as we said, let's spread it around, get it going, in communities. I mean, Ronnie Lee's got a great idea that, you need Veg Fest, but you need, kind of meetings in country halls, and you need vegan fairs all over the place, all the time, all over the place. Now, we could do that if the structure was different, but we've got this structure that, well, if you join this movement, you support some famous people, or you give money to some structures, and then you go on a cube or go on a save every now and again, and that's you done, kind of thing. That's
the problem. That's the problem, that people think, and I'm really not knocking like the Save movement and AV. I'm not knocking them. Please don't get me wrong. People in the chat, that if you're involved in those movements at a grassroots level, then and that's working for you and that's your activism, then fine. But why can't we be more creative? We can't just think that those are the ways to do activism. I mean, frankly, you know, how many animals are those movements saving? And yes, of course, you are going to, you know, you're going to get some, you know, photographs from pigs and chickens and so on trucks, and you can post those on social media, and you can use those. You can use those in, you know, whatever way you want to. But, you know, standing around in a cube. Right. Yeah. You're going to meet some people on the street. You might get into some interesting conversations. A small proportion of those, it might plant a seed, and that seed might grow at some point in the future. All of those things are fine, but we need it everywhere, and we need it all the time. And just doing it something every other weekend, right? And that makes you feel better. Who are you doing it for? Are you doing it for you to make you feel better, or are you doing it for the animals? And I would suggest the former. And I would say, please don't stop doing it, because you are possibly planting some seeds. But what more can we do as a movement? You know, and you mentioned Freely, Enduring Rider, and so on. And I found vegan YouTube in 2016 when there was a whole lot of drama going on between Freely, Enduring Rider, and a whole kind of lots of kind of plant-based, young, attractive influencers who were all jumping on the plane to Chiang Mai and going having a fruit festival and cycling up to the top of a mountain. And they thought that was activism. They thought that was what veganism was all about. And when I found this, you know, someone who's slightly older and slightly more, you know, kind of slightly more common sense, thinking, is this what vegan activism is these days? Is this what the kids are doing? Do they think that's vegan activism? You know, they don't. I remember the animal rights movement. I'm a tad younger than you, Roger, but I remember I remember the animal rights movement. I remember the ALF being in the news. I remember watching it on the 10 o'clock news as a teenager, thinking, yes, go. And my dad going, oh, all these people doing horrible things. But yeah, that was real activism for me. That was what I remembered real activism to be, not cycling up a mountain. You know, and I've kind of coined the term vegan 2.0. And what I mean by that is vegan YouTube 2.0. That what we have now, as you rightly said, we've got a nice community developing amongst mainly UK vegans, you know, vegan gays, I'm Easy Vegan, UK vegan family, etc., grumpy vegan granddad, etc., with some honourable, you know, American inclusions as well. Rebecca Brooks, for example, she's great. And we're helping each other. We're collaborating with each other. We're trying to, you know, encourage people to do their own thing, you know, like UK Vegan Families initiative about, well, let's get veganism into schools. Let's get nurseries and schools talking about veganism. You know, that there are vegan kids in nurseries, in schools all over the world. And, you know, they're doing their bit in the UK. So that initiative's kind of almost ready to roll out now. And that, you know, they've got a landing page, they've got the social media stuff set up so that once the information goes out to schools, then, you know, the schools can have a look and see who this group is and who's involved, etc. I'm Easy Vegan has developed a vegan mentoring scheme called the Vegan Switch. You know, these are things that just normal people with everyday lives and jobs are doing because they're seeing it lacking. They're seeing it that there's a need for this. Well, why can there not be lots of other types of creativity? That's activism. That's true activism for me in this day and age. You know,
totally agree. It's just a question of empowering that And also, where needed, funding that. I mean, like, apart from the VIP, I kind of volunteer with a group called Vigo, which is run out of the Back into Daylight Animal Sanctuary, Vegan Animal Sanctuary. So we've got a brilliant title, Back into Daylight. But that's kind of run by the owner of the sanctuary. And Vigo started about 7 years ago now, with him just appearing on the street and saying on Facebook, "I'm going to be on the street." And I think in the second week, one other person arrived. And now, physically, geographically, he's probably got the biggest grassroots vegan event in the world now. I mean, it's absolutely massive. You know, it actually takes over an entire area of the frontage of a bank. You know, all the railings, the bank doors and everything. It's absolutely huge. You know, it takes you 45 seconds to walk past it. It's so massive, you know. And that was all kind of initiative of somebody going, well, this is lacking, as you said. So what do we do? And now, of course, you can just go on Facebook and say, I got this idea, who wants to kind of help, and all get together that way. I mean, we've got a communication system second to none now. You know, I mean, like we're probably talking to people, you know, in several parts of the world. You know, I mean, it's the first generation that's been able to do that. You know.
Yeah, I think my viewership, I've got about 30% UK, 30% US, Canada, Australia, Ireland, and then Germany, Sweden, and then a smattering everywhere else. But we've got Vegan King, who's doing activism over in India. We've got people. We have literally just on my little channel, you know, who comment regularly on my little channel. We literally have people all over the world communicating with each other. So it's about not being told what to do. Stop waiting for people to tell you what to do. Yeah. And if you see a gap, well, what can you do? If you've identified that gap, so obviously, can you fill it? Do you know someone who can? How can you ask for help? All of those possibilities are there, and we need to kind of use the community such that it is to empower each other and to support each other. But let's move gear a little bit and talk about Carnism. So you know, I think a lot of, as we were speaking before we went live, you know, for me, a lot of my viewers, I believe, are abolitionists. You know, they're not on the welfare train thinking, you know, let's improve the welfare of animals and it's fine as long as people eat meat that's been humanely slaughtered, and you know, they maybe get their eggs from lovingly cared for backyard hens, then it's all fine, you know, because it's animal welfare that's the problem. It's the factory farming system that's the problem. And if you bypass that and get your meat and your eggs from some other place, then that's all fine. So Melanie Joy, do you want to give me your views on psychologist Melanie Joy and the concept of Carnism?
If I must, my light's just blown up, so this is why I'm looking a bit weird now. But never mind. Yeah, I've the kind of background to this. I'm really interested in the history of the movement, but also movement issues. And there's been a push towards reducitarianism and stuff in the movement. And the interesting thing about the vegan movement at the moment is that the vegan movement, as we can see it now, is quite new. We're talking about the 21st century, when veganism is now the moral baseline. That's new. I mean, like we're all vegan in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s, but we didn't campaign for veganism. We all campaigned on single issues. And I did hundreds of radio shows, quite a few TV things in the 80s. And I don't remember answering any questions about veganism because it never came up. You know, because you were there to talk about vivisection or anti-blood sports or this kind of stuff. And so, or the circus even. And so it was a different kind of weird kind of world that was going on, and nobody thought about bringing in kind of vegan education as a major kind of strategy. And so I've always been interested in why at the moment this concept of Carnism, which is a vegetarian idea, is so popular in the vegan movement. So this is Melanie Joy's book. If you see that there, whoops! I think
you disappear. You go in and out of reality when you.
I did that before, didn't I? Let me see if I can get rid of this green screen, which is obviously not working. How's that? Okay.
There we go. We can see it.
Yeah. So this is Melanie Joy's book, and on page 131, she notes that it's possible to procure eggs and dairy without violence. And so Melanie Joy acts as a kind of enabler for people like Tobias Leonhardt, who goes under the name of the Vegan Strategist. And Leonhardt used to run the Belgian Vegetarian Society. She's married to the guy who runs the German Vegetarian Society. So it's all kind of vegetarian based. And to the extent that the Vegan Strategist argues that we ought to reduce the entry cost to the vegan movement. And so he says, if you eat fishes, if you eat eggs, then you're still a vegan. And so basically what this idea is doing is trying to redefine veganism to make it vegetarianism in order to get more vegans. Okay, that's the strategy, you know. And so I've never really understood why vegan activists and abolitionists and all that, they seem to like the Carnism word. I think part of it, I think, on a psychological level, I think, this is just speculation, obviously, is I think that it contains a bit of a slur, you know. It's a little bit kind of, you're a carnist, rather than, you know, if you say, well, you're a speciesist, that's not the same. It sounds too academic, perhaps. So you're a carnist, I think, has that punch to it. And I think that might be the reason, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was using the word carnist before it twigged with me that it was Melanie Joy that coined the term carnist.
Mm.
I'd been kind of aware of Melanie Joy, obviously, before I started my YouTube channel. I'd read some of her publications, and you know, she's done some good work, like, you know, co-authoring some journal articles and things, and the term carnism I was using without realizing, you know, that it was the same carnism that Melanie Joy talked about. And I assumed that it was being used by people on YouTube as a slur, that it was just a shorthand way of saying carnivore diet, someone on the carnivore diet. And that's why I've used carnist and carnism as, you know, as not as a descriptor in any neutral sense, but as one to put people down with. But yeah, I mean, the use of language is interesting, and I've just seen kind of a comment flash by saying, oh, I didn't know that about Melanie Joy. And I do know that I've got some kind of fans of Melanie Joy, that I say fans, but supporters, people who like Melanie Joy, who watch my channel, who I know are abolitionist. And Melanie is very much, like you say, she's very much a welfarist. I mean, she's vegan herself, I believe, but believes that for us to, you know, have a vegan world in the future, the only way to do that really is to recruit people who are not actually vegan. You know, that reducing your animal product consumption, and by,
it's a little bit worse than that, though.
Whether it's backyard hens or whatever, but. It's a little bit worse than that, in the sense that through things like pro-veg, going back to the, you know, veganism as a scare word type idea, through that they do things like workshops which you pay to go to, and essentially
the argument there is that the best thing for vegans to do is not be vegan. And so, for example, Leonard would come up with all these kind of ideas. But they would say to vegan activists, it's usually fairly new vegan activists who turn up at these workshops, and they say, well, look, if you were given a lot of money to eat a steak, would you do it? And they encourage the vegans to say that they would, on the grounds that then they could use the money then for vegan activism. So there's all these kind of like ways of suggesting that the best way to promote veganism is for people not to be vegan. And the reason for that is that they've got this two-stage idea, that we're in a pre-vegan stage, and then in 20, 30 years' time, there might come a time when there's a vegan stage when you can openly talk about veganism. Until then, don't talk about veganism too much, don't talk about animal rights, and don't talk about speciesism, because that's too academic. And so there's this kind of idea that we need to, it's a little bit based on sales psychology, like, the foot in the door technique, these kind of ideas, right? And so it's the idea of it's basically almost like, from the abolitionist point of view, the abolitionists say, well, look, let's just tell them what our values are. Let's articulate our values and be honest with people about what we want. Whereas this strategy is kind of, well, a little bit like a politician, you kind of hide certain things and then you kind of slowly going to reveal it, And so, well, maybe we can get 50% of people on a mainly plant-based diet, and then maybe we can get 50% to a 60%, So it's a strategy that has got some internal consistency, I think. It's just that it's not a vegan thing. But the reason that they have to play the vegan card, and it's interesting because the vegan strategist, according to his own theory, shouldn't be called the vegan strategist because he thinks veganism is a scare word, right? And so, it's all just a kind of a bit weird. But the reason that they've got to play the vegan card is because they used to do all the kind of conference circuit, and of course, all the conferences now are run by vegans. So you couldn't be called a vegetarian tactician and get away with it. So you've got to have at least a vegan name. So there's a lot of kind of internal politics going on, but essentially it's a less than vegan idea. And I've always said, well, look, if you think about the population of reducitarians, vegetarians, vegans, the vegan group are the smallest. But the reason that the reason the reducitarians want the vegans to do reducitarianism, the reason the vegetarians want the vegans to do vegetarianism, is because they recognize that the vegans are the activists of the movement. You don't really get vegetarian activists, and you certainly don't get reducitarian activists. And so they want the vegans to do the lesser than vegan work. And my attitude is no. If you want to promote your vegetarianism, you do it. Leave the vegans alone in order to promote veganism, which should just be unequivocal, vegan message, honest, straight down the line. We've only been doing it for 20, 25 years. It's not the time to stop now. We've seen too many gains, It's really coming together now. And so it seems odd to me that you've got this almost like a push against what's going on. And I think it's because they can't get the activists. So they've got to kind of play the vegan card. It's really interesting kind of thing what's going on.
It's quite ironic, isn't it, that they have to play the vegan card, but yet they believe that we're still pre-vegan, but yet they have to play the card.
They've got no choice, but they're all doing it now. We mentioned Animal Aid and Viva and that kind of stuff. 4 or 5 years ago, certainly 4 years ago, Viva, Animal Aid, Mercy for Animals, PETA, all these groups, they regarded veganism as a scare word. And so they would say veggie or veg, go veg, or they even had that horrible thing, vegan, VEG*N, that thing, right? And so they were all too scared to go vegan. And it was the grassroots that proved them wrong. We've been saying for years that veganism is not a scare word. People don't kind of die if you mention it. People don't get shot if you mention it. And people are kind of vegan curious nowadays. And they didn't like that because they've got to think about their wages, they've got to think about their subscriptions and all the rest of it. So they couldn't be as honest and free as the grassroots. And another reason why the grassroots are better, because we can tell the truth.
Yeah.
We don't have to think, oh, if I tell the truth about veganism, does that mean all the vegetarians are going to leave, and that means I won't have enough wages, right? we don't have that problem, so we can tell the truth. You see, the grassroots are always been more honest when it comes to activism, because you haven't got all this politics. You just tell it as it is, you know.
And that's the problem, you see, when you bring big money into an organization, then you get in the situation that Joey and AV were in. You know, that you've got to appease a very rich donor who's giving you lots and lots of money. Well,
there is some social movement theory about that. I mean, people like Corey Lee Wren looks at this, and David Nybert and other sociologists have looked at the movement. And basically, when a movement becomes professional and become careerists, and they get offices and they get wages and all that, there's a big push to moderate. You know, and you know, the classic example in the literature of social movement theory is Greenpeace International. You know, we used to be very radical, and then they're now like a multinational corporation. The nearest to that in the animal movement is PETA. PETA used to be very radical, and now it's just a multi-million-pound pile of rubbish, as far as I'm concerned, because it's too sexist and racist and all the rest of it. And so, again, you know, but they're holding millions of pounds and dollars of money again. You know, it's all being concentrated into this power elite, these power centers in the movement, and we at the grassroots, we kind of let them, or you know, and we often support them. We give their leaflets out, we promote their videos and all that kind of stuff. And I understand that, because they do put out some good stuff. Well, the reason they put out good stuff is because they're rich. They can afford to put out good stuff because they can afford to employ people. If the grassroots had the money and we needed to get somebody to put a video together for us, we could do it. It's not because they're better. People have got to realize that they're not experts. They're just people like us, but they happen to be paid, and we're the grassroots. If we had access to their facilities, I mean, even now, without access to their facilities, we're producing stuff just as good. It just proves that they're not really needed. And also, we can be more faithful to the message. We can say, okay, what's the truth? Let's put the truth out. We don't have to worry about the wages and the bills and the subscriptions and, you know, are we going to upset the vegetarians and all that kind of stuff. That's all bullshit, you know. Are we allowed to say bullshit? I don't know.
Yeah, I used to kind of censor myself on YouTube just in case of the bots and the algorithm and whatever. I don't know. I swear like a trooper. So I don't care anymore. I mean, it's an interesting. These are very, very interesting times that, you know, companies who now want to cash in on the vegan name. It's now trendy to put vegan on a packaging. You know, it used to be, even if something was vegan, you know, accidentally vegan, they wouldn't put vegan on the packet, even if they could, because it would put people off. Now they're bending over backwards to put vegan on the label. But yet, those companies, even the ones who are selling wholly plant-based foods, don't want to associate themselves with animal rights. There's still this mismatch between plant-based diets being labeled vegan and you know, plastering it all over their packaging, and the animal rights movement. There is a big divide, and the problem is that when somebody goes on a plant-based diet, they think that's what veganism is.
Well, often told that by vegans, though, because we're so desperate sometimes. You know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, you know, he's seen it eating a carrot, and so he's a vegan. You know, so it's we've got to be careful. You know, celebrity culture and all that crap as well. You know, so we can easily get seduced, really, and into, well, you know, we want this kind of celebrity support and this kind of stuff. I mean, the history of our relationship with celebrities has not been good. You know, I mean, you've got a lot of people who would rather, you know, be naked than wear fur, and now they're walking up and down the catwalk in fur. You know, so you got to be careful with celebrities. They often say crappy things. I mean, there are some good ones, Joaquin Phoenix and all that. There are some good ones, but they're few and far between. A lot of them. And then, of course, we get all these celebrities that suddenly, oh, I'm not vegan anymore. Well, they kind of weren't vegan anyway, so we know that. And so there is that thing. And again, we are in a social movement, and we want our social movement to be as big as possible. So that means then that if anybody's plant-based, maybe we can include them in our social movement. But you've got to be careful there, because the research suggests, I mean, there's not a lot of it, but there is some research and say that the people who stay vegan are the ethical vegans. I know that's a controversial term, but it's often translated vegans for the animals, which is often misused. But that's the way it's often said. So, the ethical vegans tend to stay vegan, whereas there's a lot of people who come in and then they're out again. And in fact, the rate of dropout is frighteningly large. I mean, it could be as much as 80%.
Yeah.
And so, Tom Reagan, who wrote The Case for Animal Rights, he said we've got to do something. He called it about the vegan revolving door. And he says that we seem to be okay about recruiting. We don't seem to be very good at retaining. And that is a problem. Now, one of the problems is that we're recruiting people into a diet. Or into a lifestyle, whereas veganism is a philosophy. And so it tends to be that it doesn't really matter how you come into the movement, so long as you're exposed to the philosophy fairly quick. And then if you adopt the philosophy, you tend to stay vegan, because you've got an ethical and moral reason to do something. So it's not all about your muscles. It's not all about your weight loss and all that. It's to do with a moral commitment. Once you've got a moral commitment to do something, it's a lot easier to do it. And so that's what you need.
Yeah. And I think for me personally, my first foray into veganism, I went vegetarian at 11 because I loved animals and I didn't know what veganism was. And I understood. By the time I went vegan, I fully understood what was going on in the world, what was happening to cows and so on. But yet I was able to comfortably put up a wall of denial for how long? Let me do the calculation here. Nearly 30 years. I was able to put a wall up of denial and sit behind vegetarianism, saying, well, I've got the moral high ground. I'm better than you meat eaters because I'm not eating meat, and hiding behind that. So, to go back before to what we were saying about, the movement being, we've got to stand alone. We've got to put the vegan case forward and accept nothing less. And having people who are coming in and out of the movement because they're trying a plant-based diet, it's vital for them to get that vegan message, not get any other, not get a welfareist message, not get a it's fine to eat backyard hens message, not get any other message other than this movement is about animals. This movement is about the exclusion of all animal consumption and exploitation of animals, and that's the only message. No less. Nothing less than that.
Yeah. Well, what I'd say to that is that that's the focus of the movement, but it's not the scope of the movement. The scope has always been wider. So if you look if you look at the people who started the movement, they saw the liberation of other animals as being our own liberation. So as we know, the vegan movement was started in the Second World War. So I mean, it's an incredible thing in a way, because the early vegans were kind of declaring peace during a global conflict. But what they were trying to do is they were trying to work out why humanity had become so violent. I mean, they experienced 2 world wars in real quick succession.
Yeah.
And they wanted to know. I mean, the things like the Nazi Holocaust, for example, that's history to us now. They were learning it kind of fresh off the page kind of thing,
Yeah.
and in the radio. And it was a real frigging shock to them, and people like Donald Watson said that the war was a shattering experience.
Yeah.
And what the vegans were trying to work out is how could we have, they saw morality. And in fact, Watson writes about this in the first Vegan News from 1944. He says that kind of morality can be progressive or regressive. So, evolution we can evolve or we can de-evolve. And they thought that the world wars had proven that, humanity had almost like gone into some form of barbarity, and that we'd become more and more violent. Now, obviously, historically, we can argue about all that, but that's what they thought. And then they analyzed the situation. So what do we, what can bring us back out of it? And they thought that veganism was completely central to saving humanity, right? And they thought that veganism was completely integral to the idea of human moral evolution. And so they argued that if we ended up with a vegan mindset, we would be less violent as human beings. We'd be less violent towards the other animals, obviously, but we'd also be less violent towards each other. And so the liberation of other animals was always about the liberation of ourselves. And so those interlinked ideas, those entangled ideas in David Nybert's terms, were always there. But the focus is the other animals, our relationship with other animals. That's always been the focus. There's no question about that. It's just that when you get people like AV saying that's all veganism is, that's not accurate, unfortunately. And I think it's what they want veganism to be rather than what it really is. Veganism has always been much more based on peace, non-violence, justice. It's a part of the kind of justice movement. Donald Watson talked about our peace aims. You got movements like Movement for Compassionate Living, which came out of the vegan movement, and this is like an anarchic idea of peaceful humans cooperating and all this kind of stuff. So you could say some of it was utopian, if you like, which is true. But what's wrong with utopian ideas? I mean, veganism, you could say, is a utopian idea anyway. So what's wrong with that? But so the reducitarians are trying to slim things down. But the animals only people, that's also a slimmed down idea, and we need to get around it. But I'm not saying that the animals, as it's put, are not the focus. They've always been the focus and always will be the focus. So the animals have a movement. It's called the vegan movement, but it's just that the scope of it has always been wider. That's all. That's all, really.
It's really interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? Because so few people within the vegan movement now, there's my cat, understand anything to do with who Donald Watson was and why veganism was born as a movement, as a social justice movement. It's fascinating, and I think more people need to understand. Need to think about those things. But unfortunately, though, looking at the kind of the academic side of social justice movements, it isn't trendy, is it? Everybody wants the latest vegan burger and to go to the latest vegan event, and all of those things are great. All of those things have their place, but I think sometimes we just have to go back to real basics and not to mislead anyone, not to I'm struggling to find the right word. I don't really mean mislead, but not to just pigeonhole ourselves into a movement that is just out there to try the next vegan burger.
Well,
we need to have the depth. We need to have the breadth and the widening out of the movement, but we also need the depth and that depth of understanding. And I think that goes back to what we were saying earlier, that everybody needs to play to their strengths, and not everybody wants to be involved in kind of the academic side, but people who do.
I think it's something to do with, I think it's something to do with knowing your own history. It's a little bit.
Yeah.
I always say it's a little bit like people enter the Marxist movement. Say, let's just assume there's a Marxist movement, and they come in and go, "Well, I don't give a fuck about this guy called Marx. You know, Marxism to me means X, Y, and Z." And you think, "Hang on a second, you've just entered the Marxist movement here." Well, there are some people who do that with veganism. They enter the vegan movement. They don't find anything out about the history, or they reject the history, and then they go, "Well, veganism is X, Y, and Z." Now, social movements move, and that's part of the name. So that means that the ideas within the social movement will evolve. There's no problem with that. But if you want to make a case for a evolution of the movement in terms of its values, aspirations, the way it would articulate its thing, claims making, all that kind of stuff, you need to make the case in the same way as like the neo-Marxists made the case to move away from Marxism, but they understood what Marxism was in order to make the case for neo-Marxism. We've almost got a weird situation where you've got a lot of people who don't know anything about the movement, they don't know anything about the history of the movement, and they're just stating what the movement is from their own perspective. Well, I don't think that's fair, really.
And I think that this is an issue that, going back to kind of the vegan celebrities and, you know, the vegan influencers who are getting paid to influence people. What are they actually influencing them for? It's to sell a brand or to sell a product. And I'm not saying, of course, that those influencers, not all of them at least, don't understand veganism. They're not there for, you know, they're not there just to sell a brand. It would concern me a lot if they were. You know, I'm talking here like Joey Carbstrong, Earthling Ed, etc. It would concern me if that's all they were doing. But they're somewhat compromised in that. There's a disconnect. I find myself feeling disconnected from it's like there's cliques. It's like there's not veganism doesn't have an identity. It doesn't have a strong enough identity that people are using the word vegan to mean something that it doesn't. And I think we're losing our identity.
Well, I'd say vegan animal rights. I mean, you know, Leslie Cross, who probably did more to develop the philosophy of veganism than even Donald Watson does. Donald Watson is the famous person. Everybody knows Donald Watson. Yeah. Leslie Cross actually pointed out around about the end of the 40s into the 50s that veganism didn't have a definition. The vegan diet had a definition, but not veganism. And so that's when they developed the philosophy. And that's when they came up with the idea that, you know, veganism is part of human evolutionary progress, this kind of stuff. And Leslie Cross said, we're not welfare, we're rights. And he said, we're not welfare, we're liberation. He said, we take the side of the liberators. So they kind of firmed up the philosophical side of it, you know. And I mean, there are some people who said that Leslie Cross kind of did a coup, but you know, Watson praised Leslie Cross right to the end of his life, and said that, you know, we owe a great debt to Leslie Cross, people like Arthur Ling, you know. And if people do want to look at the history, by the way, if you go to VegFest UK on, you know, Google it, there's a little section called "And If You Know Your History," and it's like I think it's a 7-8 part series which I wrote, and it's all about these leading pioneers of the movement. Including all the women, you know. There's a lot of female voices which tend to get drowned out, as usual, in social movements by male voices. But, you know, there's a lot of those, you know, Kathleen Janaway, Eva Batt, there was quite a lot, Elsie Shrigley, you know, lots of really powerful women. And, you know, veganism in those days, in terms of when it happened, you know, times of rationing and all the rest of it, end of the war, it was a revolutionary idea. Yeah. You know, and they were real kind of revolutionaries. Now, the part about that is that it didn't look like revolutionaries, and they didn't sound like revolutionaries, but in their own terms, they were real revolutionaries. They were radicals.
Yeah.
The historian of the vegan society said that they were anti-establishment. I mean, veganism was a fuck off to everybody. It's kind of, you stop violating those rights, and we do that. And so vegan animal rights for me, and when, I suppose the first of the vegan influences, and I hate that term, to emerge was James Aspey. And he used to do a lot of work, or at least he used to ask a lot of advice from a group that I was in at the time called AR Zone. When he came to Dublin, I had a long talk with him because he wanted to know about animal rights theory. And so, I was talking about Tom Reagan and stuff. And so this is another fault line in the movement, is the fact that we call our movement animal rights, but really there's a heck of a lot of welfare in it.
Yeah.
It all gets very messy. We talk about having mercy, don't be cruelty and all that. We don't talk about rights violations. We don't claim that other animals are rights bearers. That's not our language. That's more the language of the human rights movement. We talk about don't be cruel, which really essentially is a welfare thing. But if you look at the language of our movement, we're in the welfare paradigm. But I think a lot of people think, well, if we talk about animal cruelty and then put a vegan message on the end of it, I'm an abolitionist. It doesn't necessarily culturally kind of work, because we're born into cultural speciesism. And within cultural speciesism, you've got animal welfare ideology, which basically says that non-cruel use is not only feasible, but common. And the people who are cruel are the one bad apples and all that kind of crap that goes on, right? But so the idea that we can, and we teach our kids that, this is generational transmission here. We teach our kids, don't be cruel, but the idea of not being cruel doesn't preclude using them, right? And so it's kind of treatment and use kind of situation, and we don't seem to have fully understood that. Gary Francione was very good at kind of pointing out that, but he got a lot of his lessons from Tom Reagan. I mean, Francione has kind of shot himself in the foot big style, because his personality is so bad that he can't. No, honestly, he can't function in a social movement. He's just not got the personality for it. And I've said, and I know this sounds a bit weird, but I've said that Gary Francione's work, which is pretty good, his substantive texts are quite good.
Yeah.
They'll become more important in the movement when the guy himself is dead. His personality is just he's got this kind of toxic personality, which he can't cope with a group situation, and he can't cope with people not following the rules and that he lays down, and if you don't do precisely what he says all the time, then you're a welfarist. He's got this kind of thing, right? And so he's kind of, like, his ideas are good, but his personality doesn't work in a social movement context, which is a terrible shame in a way, because we've rejected the ideas because he's been so horrible to everybody. And so I think, you talk about I imagine most people in the chat probably think of Gary Francione in a bit of a joke kind of way or something, because, he's got no status in the movement. He actually claims to be a counter movement. So he doesn't see himself as being part of the movement, because he says that we're a welfare movement or the animal confusion movement. Now, that part of it is true.
It is true. It is true. Yeah.
It's just that everybody rejects that message because of the person who's making it. It's a real shame, but it's something that we need to work through as a movement, and it's going to take a while for his ideas to resurface once he's gone. I know that sounds weird. I know that.
Just ignore my cat. She's well, who's the boss in my house? Yeah, it's not me, is it? Shall we open up the the chat and say, guys, we've talked about a lot. We have talked about a lot, and I'd like to kind of get the opinion of the chat on these issues. So
Before we do that, can I just say that somebody asked me to explain the eye dabbing that I do.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And so they said they were going to be in the chat. And so the thing is, I went to a demo. It was a Hillgrove cat breeders demo, and I got hit by a police officer, and he broke my cheekbone in 4 places. In fact, I could still feel the breaks if I run my finger along my eye socket. Yeah. So he hit me here, and this entire piece of cheek went into my face. And it was the beginning of the age of the internet, and so I was recommended by this doctor to have this operation. And then I discovered what they were going to do is they were going to kind of put an incision here and put this kind of spatula in and pull the cheek back out again. And somebody said they knew people who have undergone that procedure, and because they're cutting all the nerves up here, it can do more damage than good. So I decided not to do it. So the surgeon said to me, well, you either have the operation or you're going to have a bit of a caved in face. So I said, well, I think I can go with a caved in face.
I think
so it is a bit on this side. It is a little bit caved in, but it's kind of come out over the years. But ever since then, it's affected my nasal situation and my eyes. So my tear ducts and that have been. So ever since then, I mean, we're talking about the 90s. My eyes have always been runny. If I've got a bright light on me or if I'm out in the cold, the wintertime is terrible. I've always got to have a big wad of tissue. So it always looks like I'm crying, but I'm not. It's just that I've got this problem, which was caused by the activist days.
You see, it was caused by veganism. It was caused by
paid the price. Yeah, got 2 divorces because of veganism. Yeah, so.
Oh, I don't know whether you're aware of the channel Vegan Deterioration, but she'd have a field day.
I saw your video. Yeah.
She'd have a field day with it. Oh my God. Right, guys, have you got any questions for Roger? There's been a lot of long posts in the chat, and I've been keeping an eye on them, but I've been concentrating so much on the discussion.
Hey, come on, folks. You know that Michelle says this every time. I've been keeping up, but I've missed them, and you can't be bothered to scroll back. So people have got to redo them, haven't they? That's what it is.
No. I will scroll back. The problem with scrolling back is when a new post comes on, then it jumps back, and it frustrates me. But we will go a little bit up. So, Cat the Vegan Artist likes Professor Francione. Difficult with social situations comes with the territory for one on the autism spectrum. So yeah, it could be. I don't know.
I don't think so. I know Francione really well. We worked together quite a lot. We were kind of buddies at one point, as it were. But I don't think it's that. I am experienced with being close to people with autism, and I don't think it's that. It's probably more to do with narcissism, probably, if you're looking for a label. It just somebody who doesn't work well in teams really is kind of got to be the leader, has got to tell you what to do, and he's very strict about it all. And there's a whole bunch, 30 or 40 people who were part of the abolition approach who have kind of been have all left because of his position. And now we're all welfareists. I mean, he calls me and I think at one point he called me a vile welfareist, I think. And he said that my group VIP was a welfareist organization. But that's just his default position, that everybody is welfare. Because some of his analysis is very dated. He still thinks that people are outside fur shops in leather jackets and wool and that, which doesn't happen nowadays. So some of his analysis is a bit kind of dated, but he kind of sticks to it, And then the single issue stuff, and I mean the really interesting thing, because he does think that you can abolitionize single issues, but then he says that, well, you shouldn't do it because I'm the only one who could do it properly, so you shouldn't do it. So it's that kind of ego thing which gets in the way, because he thinks that we could say do a circus demo, and that would fit into the abolitionist approach. And so the way I think about it is instead of thinking of single issue campaigns, you think of single issue events.
Mm.
And they're fine because they fit into your abolitionist thing. So I call it abolitionization of a single issue event, and that's fine. And even Francione says that so you can do your circus protest, your rodeo protest within the abolitionist thing. But then he says that really he's the only one who could do it properly, so you shouldn't do it. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
But I mean, I mean, when I was working with him, I quite liked him. He's a very charming guy when you meet him. He's impossible to work with. He's really difficult.
You're making Gary sound like a charismatic leader.
Oh, he is to some people. He's got a lot of people who are very loyal to him, and they would also call me a vile welfarist. So they
are. Chris Hines, hi Chris. So one thing I do like about GF, though, is he talks about the pet trade, which is how I found him. It's an area a lot of people look over. A lot of people do look over the pet trade, which is a shame. And again, it's about not the movement not having an identity. That it'll always come back to that for me, that there's huge disconnects within the movement. I think so.
You mean things like animal companions or pets and backyard hens riding horses? I
read that to be kind of like breeders, like people who breed dogs and cats and so on as a business for profit, and then they sell them, and then those animals end up in shelters, and then the animals already in shelters get put down to make way for the new animals that have just been sent from people who bought a dog or a cat from a breeder, who after 6 months, when it loses its cuteness, that poor little creature goes to the shelter.
Yeah, well, Gary Francione's always said that there's nobody in the world who likes and appreciates dogs as much as he does. But if it was up to him, and there's only 2 left who as it were, wanted to breed, he would prevent that, which is interesting, really, because I mean that's a nuanced thing. You could have an argument about that. Spay and neuter, is that a rights violation? Because on the face of it, it is, which is quite an interesting thing. We're kind of forced to be utilitarians sometimes, and even if you don't want to be,
Yeah, I mean, this cat, she's spayed. When she came to live with me, she wasn't spayed, and she had kittens. She was pregnant and had kittens. So there we go. If my Tasha hadn't been spayed at that point, she'd have carried on having kittens for the rest of her life, and she's nearly 15 now. So I don't know how long cats are fertile, but 5 kittens every 6 months. So is it a rights violation? Possibly.
Well, Chris is saying yes, it's the lesser of 2 evils. Well, yeah, that's what we're saying. Yeah, I mean, you're kind of forced into it. But I mean, one interesting thing about that is that often you'll get people coming up, fresh consumers, and people come up and they almost like say, what are you going to do about X, Y, and Z, right? And it's kind of like, what are you vegans going to do about a problem that you had nothing to do with, you didn't create, I created it, but you've got to come up with a solution. And you think, oh, thanks very much, mate. Nothing to do with me.
Yeah, and they think they've got you. That gotcha moment that no one has ever thought of. It's like crop deaths is one that the carnivore diet crowd throw at us all the time, that you're not an ethical vegan because you eat lettuce, or you eat bread, or you eat, and it's like, well, all right, what do you suggest that we eat then? And then they'll come back with, well, you could live on 1 cow a year. Right, a cow has enough meat on her bones to feed a person for a whole year. So it's like, well, are you living on that 1 cow? And no, I'm not. But I'm saying you could. Well, why don't you then? You know, and they don't. It's ridiculous. They don't have an answer, and it's just these stupid things that are thrown out to us. And
used to happen in the. Yeah, I mean, I started doing street work in the 1980s. We used to have this big stand in Liverpool at the time, and we used to get a common thing, which is people come up and go, "You shouldn't be doing this. You know, you should be helping the humans." And I'd always go, well, I'm really interested in human rights. You know, have you got a petition? Have you got anything to show me? I've got, a leaflet to give me. And they go, no, I haven't. And I go, well, what are you on about then? So what you're basically saying is that you're not doing anything, but you're then complaining that I'm doing the wrong thing. But there's some interesting sociology to that, in the sense that there is like a social category in people's minds of demonstrator or protester. And they think, well, I'm not a protester, I'm not a demonstrator, so that's nothing to do with me. You're one of those, so I can comment on whether you're doing it right, which is why often you get people coming past a demonstration and they shout two things. They shout, get a life and get a job, right? Because they're kind of internalizing this idea that there is a social category called protester, which of course is not true. But that's what they think. It kind of absolves them of having to do anything. But then they can still complain about the ones who are doing something, because I think they're doing it wrong.
Yeah, you're doing veganism wrong because you're protesting about the wrong issue. Oh dear me. That is very true, Chris. But back to the dog thing. Pugs, for example, have a ton of chronic issues. Is it ethical to continue? No, I'm afraid there's no ethics behind the dog breeds that have got congenital defects because at some point in the past humans thought it was cute. You know, those animals do. It's a shame. I love pugs. They're cute. They are cute. But they die young, unfortunately. And there's many breeds who have got, inbuilt genetic problems because they were inbred. They were inbred in the days when that breed standard was, being developed. They've been bred like my Jack. He's gone blind because that's a congenital defect that, unfortunately,
Yeah, the ones with the round eyes, they often drop out and stuff, don't they? But that issue brings up a movement issue, which a lot of the public don't understand, because they kind of go, hang on a minute, are you saying that if you had your own way and there was a vegan world, there would be some other animals which wouldn't exist? And of course that would be true. Yeah. I think the public have a lot of difficulty getting their head around that, because we've created these kind of almost like, if you like, monsters, because they're nothing like what they should be like. I mean, you could even say that about the modern day chicken. But I think they're viable. There's an animal expert called Harold Brown who used to be a beef farmer and now he's a vegan expert, and he says there's certain types of livestock who probably would be viable to live as free living beings, but there's going to be others that can't, and probably some of the ones who can't are these massive pigs that are bred now. I remember breaking into a research center years and years ago, a Bibby's thing, and we were looking at the breeding sows. They're absolutely huge. They were laid on the side. It was when they were bringing in that kind of system. They're absolutely massive. And you're thinking, well, they probably wouldn't really, they weren't very agile. They probably got arthritis, because let's face it, the farming community, they only kind of keep them healthy up until, if they manage to do that, up until slaughter time. So, and as we know, all these he-men who are eating their meat and all that, they're eating babies and adolescents, and so that's all the job of the animal farmers have to do, is keep them viable as a stock unit up until slaughter time. And then so when you rescue them, I remember an ALF rescued pig who the activist called Rasher, of all things, and Rasher got ill one time, and they called out an agricultural vet, and they said, "What's the matter with Russia?" And the guy said, "I don't know." And he said, "Well, why not?" And he said, "Well, I've never seen a pig this old before." And so,
and how old was poor Asher? Like 3 or?
Yeah. I mean, relatively young, but the vet had never seen a pig that old before. So there you go.
That is insane, isn't it? Yeah, I think cows would be viable in the wild, and some breeds of chicken would be viable in the wild. Sheep would do well, because sheep have largely. I know there are some kind of factory farming operations. Canada, for example, is trialing factory farming, but it's not factory farming as in keeping them in tiny stalls. It's keeping them in barns. So more like the way cows are kept in winter in the UK. So sheep would do fine. But yeah, there wouldn't be a need for those animals, would there? If people didn't eat them, there would be no need for them. So yeah, we definitely see the eradication of some animals. So vegans are trying to create less animals, and that can be thrown against us. Well,
of course, we're creating a heck of a lot more space for free living beings. I mean,
there you go. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, what is it? There's only 4% of. I mean, of all the mammals in the world now, there's only 4% of a free living, and so we've actually. I mean, like we kind of behave like occupiers on planet Earth. We've come and we've kind of wiped. We've kind of created some kind of genocide where we're trying to eradicate every other species apart from the ones that we want to either gawp at, have as living ornaments, or have as food or research models and everything else. Mm-hmm. So we've been totally ruthless, in our exploitation, and we've violated rights left, right, and centre. And there's hardly any of them left. It's a bit like looking at forests. I mean, I live in Ireland. I mean, Ireland used to be one big forest, and now you just got little clumps of trees, And so, we've been pretty ruthless when it comes to it. We've got this kind of instrumental functionalist view of the world. And one of the things we've got to change as vegans is that instrumentality of our values. I used to do a course on critical theory, and we used to talk about instrumental reason. The idea of looking at others as a resource rather than, for their own value and this kind of stuff. Well, we do that with each other and the rest of the world. Yeah. And it's such a terrible kind of violent response to it. We've got to get ourselves out of that mindset.
Yeah.
The Donald Trump mindset, that kind of crap.
And again, it's a level of depth that the vast majority of vegans, unfortunately, they don't go there. We're getting the breadth, but we're not getting the depth. And this is just a perfect example. A vegan fashion influencer just got a longer dachshund. What's that? £2,500 plus. Needs a special poof to get onto the sofa because his spine is so long and weak, potentially snap. She has 650,000. Oh my God. Yes, indeed. I love dachshunds. They're beautiful. Lovely little dog. There was a question. Is
that more subs than you've got, Michelle?
Just a few, just a handful. Just a handful.
I think you've got about 3 times the amount I've got, so you're doing all right.
We've got a good question here. We are going to wrap up soon because we've been on nearly 2 hours, and my battery is on 17%. So got probably about 10 minutes before I just disappear completely. So let's make this the final question. What do you think of introducing species such as wolves back into the wild?
Yeah, this is the rewilding issue, and it's very complex. So you got people like Mark Beekoff, who actually writes for Psychology Today. I don't know if you're familiar with Mark Beekoff.
I've heard the name, yeah.
Yeah, I did a podcast with him a couple of years ago, and rewilding will be quite a difficult process. Unfortunately, human interference in the free living world has never been very good or successful. So, it's a little bit like, you've got a strand in the vegan movement who talk about, wild animal suffering.
I was going to bring that up next. Yeah,
this is kind of negative utilitarianism. David Pearce kind of saying this idea. I mean, Pearce says that we should use our godlike powers to micromanage every square meter of the planet. And you're thinking, well, we can't even control, the urban centers, let alone that. So the idea that is a feasible thing, especially now. I mean, obviously, it's an interesting thing because in some senses, animal rights theory doesn't address that issue, and of course that's what it's criticized for. But animal rights theory is about humans. It's about what we do and what our values are. And so the rights that other animals have creates duties in us because we're moral agents, not in moral patients. And so there's a distinction to be made there. But yeah, it's something that needs to be done. Funny enough, there was an issue about Dublin Zoo just last week, because they're demanding money. In fact, they put an appeal out, and I think they got €1 million in one day to save the zoo. Now zoos see themselves as conservationists and all that, but the problem is we destroy the habitat all the time. Okay. And so we're destroying the other animals' homes, and then where do they go to? And then how long does it take? How many generations does it take to get to a situation where we could rewild them? And what state is that population then, with all the interbreeding and all that goes on? Because the gene pool, even if you take all the zoos together, is fairly small, right? So, zoos, safari parks and all that kind of stuff, it's a huge logistical problem to rewild. And as I said, we don't have a good record of it. In fact, you could think of it this way. Most of the knowledge that we've ever had about other animals is how to kill them and exploit them. Until recently, when you've got things like cognitive ethology, which is looking at other animals for their own sake. And now we're starting to find remarkable things about other animals that we never knew and we never expected.
Yeah.
For example, the idea that they've got a proto-morality, the idea that they will save each other. And some species will save individuals from other species, which all the behaviorists would say was impossible. This goes against the kind of imperative for survival and all this stuff. So we're finding out more and more about other animals in great ways. But I mean, I don't even know if you've got time to do all that, but I'm not sure that humans have got the ability to do it. First of all, I think we've got the mindset where we're going to want to be able to do it. And then we're going to have to try and teach ourselves how to do it in the best possible way. But I mean, I try to be optimistic, but I'm a bit pessimistic about that, I think, at least in the short term. But then again, with the environmental crisis, how long do we have even,
Yes, indeed. So guys, I'm on 13% now, so I'm constantly watching my
is this you or your computer?
Well, me, I'm on less than 13%, I think. Thank you so much, Roger, for coming on. It has been absolutely fascinating to have somebody who has known the movement, has been in the movement, has been seminal and central in the movement for so long. It's been quite an honor to have you on my channel. And
well, thank you for that. But I would want to say that there's a lot of people who've done what I've done and more. I'm not used to pushing myself forward. I'm quite shy, even though I kind of do this and I've been a lecturer and all that. But then again, you see, I can talk to a group of 500 students a lot easier than, a little group of 3 or 4 people.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of stuff going on back then, I'm nothing special. So thanks for all the nice things you've said, but there's lots of people like that, but that's what we want to encourage.
Yeah.
Everybody to be the best that they can be, as you said yourself a couple of times.
Exactly. So on that note, I'll let you go, Roger. I'm just going to stay on literally for 2 minutes, just to say what's coming up next on the channel. And
we've got an animal rights show on Sunday, folks, 5 o'clock.
That's 5 p.m. Yeah, I've got that in my brain now.
Okay.
If people stream at a regular time every week, I can get it in my head. So I shall be watching that on Friday at 5. So
no,
thank you so much.
Sunday at 5.
Sunday at 5. Sorry, did I say something else? Sunday at 5. Yeah. Brilliant. So thank you so much, and I'll speak to you. I'll speak to you soon.
Okay. Take care, folks.
See you. Bye. Guys, that was fascinating. That was really, really interesting. I hope you guys found it equally as interesting as I did. But obviously, I'm an academic, so I like talking about these academic arguments and debates and ideas. But Helen, you're working on being the best you can be. Well, that's all any of us can do, isn't it? And we all have to just put the best foot forward and see where it takes us. So what's coming up on the channel is I spent 4 hours today, 4 hours, which means I've got to work tomorrow because I literally spent half of my working day commenting on the debate that I had with Beekoff last year that he copyright struck me for on my second channel. 4 hours, well, 3 hours, 44 minutes to be precise. And it took me a while to export it because there wasn't enough space on this computer to export it. I should have done it in 2 bits, but no, I just went all the way through. So I had a massive problem. So then I had to delete all my apps to give it enough space to be able to export. So I've had an absolute nightmare today with technology. There you go. I've had to delete all my photo editing stuff and I can't get it back. So I'm struggling. I'm struggling. So that's going to go up on my second channel. And I think I'm going to stream next on, I think probably Monday evening. I'm not sure what topic I'm going to talk about, but yeah, so I think Monday will be the next time I stream, and I'll think of a good topic for us. And yeah, there may or may not be a video tomorrow because I've got to try and sort out this and try and get my photo editing stuff back on. And I've got to do the work that I didn't do this afternoon. So there may or may not be a video tomorrow. But if not, there'll definitely be one on Sunday. And you can go and watch the 3-hour, 44-minute debate with me commenting on myself over on my second channel. And given the state of my internet being really bad, it's going to take me literally all night to upload it. It's 19 gigs. How is it 19 gigs? That's why I didn't have enough space to export it off this computer. 19 gigs. It's going to take me all night to upload the thing. So I do hope that you bloody well watch it. You can watch it on double speed. You can do it right. You can watch it in intervals. You can play it in the background when you're washing up or whatever. Yeah, 19 gigs. Yeah. Baz, 19. I'm sure it's lied to me. And I exported it on like low resolution. I don't get it. I don't get how it's so big, but apparently that's how big it is. But there we go. But I am really going to have to go because my battery's now red, which means it's going to go any second. So thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. And thanks once again to Roger. And yeah. Can you break it into smaller videos? I can't because I've deleted my editing software. Right, this is the thing, right? I use iMovie, which is free. Right, I'm going to say this fast because if I just disappear, then this is, I'm not being rude. It's just the battery's gone. Right, look. Right, I use iMovie, which is free with Apple products. But I had to delete it to free up space because it's like takes up like 2 gigs on the thing. So I thought, right, I'll delete that. I delete SPSS, which is my stats thing. I deleted a photo editing program that I actually bought, like to edit photos, which I actually bought. And I thought, it's fine. I can just re-upload them from the App Store. So I can't, can I? Because they've upgraded iMovie, which right, it's there in the App Store and it's free, but I can't now have it on this computer because I'm on like version 10.13 and this needs 10.15.6. Right, so I tried to download 10.156 and it won't let me have that, because I don't have 10.15, and yet 10.15 is not available to download. So my brain has gone. So now I've got my son's old computer, because he's got the previous version of this, right? Which no longer works. Like the trackpad doesn't work, some of the keys don't work. And I said, no, we'll keep that as a spare. Don't sell it. We'll keep that one as a spare because you'll get hardly any money for it because it's like a bit bashed up because it's a teenage boy's had it, right? So I've had to get that out, right, to hopefully be able to edit. So what I could do is see whether that computer will handle the 19 gig file, and then I can split it up into smaller videos. My brain has been fried this afternoon. 4 hours with Bart K, and then that. So there you go. So it was very pleasant to spend a couple of hours with Roger and you guys. Baz, no, I do not need a PC. I do not need Microsoft in my life. I have to endure Microsoft at work. I do not have to endure it at home. I'm sorry. Tasha's agreeing with me. Tasha's in my video. Tasha spent about half an hour bugging me in my video. Didn't you, Tash? Didn't you? Anyway, I've got to go, guys. I've really got to go. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you once again to Roger. Thanks for the mods and everybody who's doing stuff. I don't think we've had any trolls. I think this was far too serious a conversation for the trolls to even bother with this. You know, we're like using words that were, you know, bigger than one syllable. So, you know, anyway, I'm out of here. Bye, folks.